Merci, the Dead to Star. Thank you for being here tonight. We thought it would be a unique occasion because Aileen was catching the train. She should be in Paris tomorrow, but finally she decided to go back to London. But it was a unique occasion to hear from the experience in London. And we were talking with Amandine, we realized that there were quite a few things to say about Brussels as well. So this is the reason why and thank you, TheMerode, for taking the challenge of organizing this. I don't have to introduce EPIC, I think. But if you need to know more, come and ask questions after the show. So I wrote some things, but some words, but it's quite important to understand things that very few of us know. In London or in Brussels, at least 1 of 4 working families regularly struggle to feed their own children. In England, and you stop me if I'm wrong, but I think around 70% of the teachers expect that at least 1 pupil in a class will experience hunger because their parents cannot afford to feed them. And I heard that in Brussels it's the same. In the poorest areas, only 9% of teachers believe that no child in their class will go hungry. Only 9%. Yes. At the same time, in the UK, around 6 million tons of food, edible food, are wasted each year. Almost 900,000 tons of bread are wasted every year, which is 24 million slices each day. So that's why we're here, to raise awareness about these issues, how connected they are, both food waste on one side and food precarity on the other one, especially in the urban areas. But we're here, moreover, to show that there are solutions. And thank you, Amandine, and thank you, Aileen, for explaining what kind of solutions, where it comes from, where it goes, and so forth. Huh? C'est bon? All right. Yeah. So, please, Amandine, can you introduce yourself and 4 Wings?
Yes, thank you for having me. So 4 Wing Foundation is a foundation that was born 10 years ago, created by a family of entrepreneurs. And it's true that from the very beginning, we were there to fight poverty in Belgium. And so we had 3 pillars, as Alice said, which were social housing, tech education, and preventive health. But during COVID, we realized that we really wanted to strengthen our impact on one thematic, and it became very obvious that food was very essential. And so we decided to focus all our efforts on food, and we are promoting access to quality food for all. So how do we do that? We do that by supporting social innovators and by fostering collaboration to achieve that. So this is kind of projects we are supporting in Brussels and in Wallonia. As a foundation, as I said, we were created by entrepreneurs. So I think we have an entrepreneurial approach, which is kind of hybrid in the ecosystem, because we can mobilize a wide range of tools, not only financial ones, but also in our involvement, we can go from mainly funding. We never do only funding, but we can go from mainly funding to co-creating projects with local partners when we see that there is a need that is not met, like with you, Marie. I see you there. And we can also replicate projects that are coming from abroad and that are not in Brussels. So hopefully we can do this with you someday. What else can I tell you? To give you a scope of what we are doing. So in 10 years, because we're celebrating our 10 anniversaries at the end of this year, we've mobilized 10 million euros. So it makes it approximately 1 million euro a year, supporting nonprofit organizations. And it's regarding the financial tools, it's about 80% donation, 15% equity, and 5% loans. Yeah, I think that's somewhat what we do.
Thank you, Amandine. So between us, I called this conference the 3A conference because we have Amandine, Aileen, and Alice. But then we should have called it the 310s because 10th anniversary, and Epic 10th anniversary as well. Bon. Aileen, thank you for hopping in. Can you tell us what happened and how and what is the Felix Project and how it came up?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to speak English, because you would not want me to speak French. This would be a very slow presentation. We would get there. I mean, luckily surplus is the same word, but everything else might be a bit tricky. So thank you for that. The Felix Project is also 10 years old. We were born in 2016, and we exist to solve two problems. The first problem, as Pac said, is that in the UK we waste around 6.5 million tons of edible food every year. It's equivalent to 15 billion meals. This is, we can talk about the social problem, but it is a climate problem. And if we wish to reach anywhere near climate neutrality, we must do something about food waste and the greenhouse gases created when food ends up in landfill. I'm not sure how much you can see of that, but the little green sliver of that tomato is the edible food that is currently redistributed to people. And obviously you can see the rest of that tomato, that 51%, is what is wasted. So even in the UK, we have a huge opportunity to get more good food to more people. Following on from that, so on the left is where surplus food should go. And when I say surplus food, I have some pictures of what's been in our depots recently later in this presentation, but this is food that you and I would buy in the supermarket. It is food that is surplus. It is not end of life. It is not yellow label. It has not gone past its use by date. It is good quality food that often comes straight from the farm gate, for example. So actually fresher than anything you'll get in a supermarket. This is where it should go. It should be redistributed to people first. You'll see that currently less than 1% is redistributed to people. We feed it to animals, we recycle it, we use it to make energy, and we send it to landfill, all before we get it to people who are struggling to be able to feed themselves and their families. So in January this year, 7.3 million adults in the UK experienced food insecurity. That means they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And about a third reported not eating for an entire day purely because they could not afford to eat. Many people, many working families in London have just £3 to spend on food, which if you've ever bought a coffee, you'll know that's that. So we are really talking about a poverty problem as well as a food problem. And, you know, we talked about this, Amandine, when we spoke. The real victims of this are children. About 75% in children in London live in poverty after their parents have paid for their housing costs, which means they won't be eating enough or enough good quality food to do all the things that we want children to do, to grow, to play, to be sociable. So this is why the Felix Project exists. We want a London where good food is never wasted and no one goes hungry. And so we exist to save food from going to waste, from going to landfill, and we deliver it to people most in need. This is what we achieved in 2024. Some big numbers on the board there. We delivered enough food for over 38 million meals. This is just in London, so within the M25, just the 32 boroughs. But I suppose I would also draw your attention to that £63 million of food value. This is It makes no business sense to have all of that food being wasted. That is food that someone has paid for at some point. We should be eating it. So how do we work? These are some of the people that we work with, some quite familiar brands on that board. Amazon Fresh deliver to us 3 times a week. Hello Fresh, I don't know if you have something like that here. Yep. We collect from them probably a ton of food a week. Marks and Spencer's, Natura, a beautiful brand that sells into some of the most high quality supermarkets in the UK. Waitrose, Tilda, good old Pret-a-Manger, where I got my sandwich on the train today. And Ocado, who are an amazing partner of ours, committed to funding us and giving us food, and indeed giving us space to house that food, which is fantastic. So this is what some of the food looks like when it comes in. This is the scale that we're talking about. This is just a normal delivery for us. Straight, as you'll see, because it's not packaged, this has come straight from a farm. There's nothing wrong with those parsnips. They look a little yellow on this screen, but I can assure you, there's nothing wrong with them. But they have ended up surplus purely because we have grown too much. We then sort it. We work out of 4 warehouses at the compass points of London, and we rely on an army of volunteers. About 13,500 people volunteered their time with us last year to sort that food, to check that it's good, and then to pack it. This is half of what used to be one of our biggest warehouses, then became our smallest warehouse. We've now outgrown this by about 4 times, but this is the kind of activity that we see in our depots. You can see the quality of the food that comes in. We sort that, we divide it all up, and we then repack it. We have a small community kitchen where we make pre-prepared meals. We make 5,000 meals a day that are delivered in the same way as our raw ingredients. And again, you can see volunteers there doing all of the work. We then distribute it. So we work with 1,200 community organisations in London who distribute the food on our behalf to people who need it most. Those community organisations can be anything from primary schools, domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters. They are all doing incredible work building resilient communities in London. And the food for them is a way to bring people in to give them the help that they need. So this is one of the schools that we deliver to. You'll see at least 7 crates of food going in there. And then the children come and help us by taking as much food as they possibly can, which is always a bit comedy. So I'm just going to finish by showing you some of the things that have ended up in the depot in the last couple of months, and you will see just the quality of what we get. And it's one of the things that makes me the most proud of working for this organisation, is that this is food that for many people that we deliver to, they simply could not ever dream of affording this food. But frankly, I believe that they have a right to it. And so my job is to facilitate getting it to them. So this, very quickly, this man is the love of my life. His name is Peter. He runs a farm in Kent. And 3 years ago, his daughter-in-law emailed us to say, we can't find anyone to pick our apple and pear orchard, and we've taken a subsidy from the government to cover our costs. But the subsidy means that we cannot pick or make a profit or sell our apples and pears. Would you like them? And Peter always tells the story that within 20 minutes, someone from our food team had emailed back saying yes. And that was all well and good until we really thought about the fact that we would have to get 40 people a day to a farm in rural Kent to pick these apples and pears. And we had about 3 weeks to organise an entire picking season. But luckily, our partners came together. We managed to get everybody down there. And within 6 weeks, we'd not only picked 130 tonnes of apples and pears, which went directly to our community organisations, but we'd also picked fruit that we were then able to juice and keep for 2 years. So we were able to add value as well in what we were able to pick. So he's my hero.
Thank you, Aileen. So I remember two figures. You said 13,000 volunteers?
Yeah, so we are volunteer-led. We require about 170 volunteers a day across our operation to make them 100% efficient. We very rarely get to 170 volunteers a day, but our volunteers range from people who give an hour of their time after work to transport food from an office cafe to a community organisation, to a man called Duncan who volunteers with us in West London. He drives a van for us 6 days a week. He's retired. He used to work for Sainsbury's, and when he came to us, he said, I used to watch food going out of the back of the shops into a bin, and I want to do something to change that. So he now volunteers with us, and he takes his van home with him. He gets his own Felix van. We have 50 of these vans, but one of them is Duncan's, and no one else is allowed to drive it because he's the guy who drives to HelloFresh in Banbury at 3:30 in the morning once a week, drives all of the produce back to West London, and then does a full volunteer day shift. So there's space for everybody, but volunteers are hugely important to us, hugely.
And the other figure was 1,200?
1,200 community organisations.
1,200?
Yeah, 1,200.
Which are your end points?
They are our customers, I suppose, although we don't charge them. We don't pay for the food. The food is all donated to us. So, we were talking about this earlier, a very lovely relationship with our community organisations because we need them, they need us, but there's no financial jiggery-pokery going on. And so when we ask them for help, they're more than happy to help us, and vice versa. We will always do what we can to help them. So,
okay. So, Amandine, how would you define food insecurity here in Brussels, for instance?
Well, in Brussels and in the world, I think it's important for the rest of the conversation we are about to have. So, as you said, I think in the beginning, it's 2.2 billion people in 2024 suffering from food insecurity. Food insecurity can range from moderate to severe. So moderate is when you are worried about running out of food, and severe is when you are going a whole day without eating, and I'm not talking about fasting. So it's the lack of reliable food, access to food that is healthy in enough quantity and that is really nutritious for you. So we are talking about 6 criteria, and I think it's important to really good and understand them. So it's availability, of course, is there enough food in your areas? So that's not really of our concern. Then you have access, and access, it's not only the economic means, it's also the physical access. And even in Brussels, we have some places that we call food deserts, when you cannot actually have access easily to nutritious food, to healthy food. You have places where you only have junk food. Then you have utilization. So that's the knowledge, the tools, and the resources to be able to prepare and consume food. And when I started in this field, I was really shocked to learn that people in Brussels didn't have a fridge or a proper oven or stove to properly cook their food. And so if you don't have that, you cannot have a healthy diet. There is the question, of course, when we are talking about insecurity of stability. So we've seen in the past years the impact of COVID, of the war in Ukraine. So that is, of course, affecting the consistency of the stability of the food we're able to get. And then something that it really is important to us, because we have to talk about dignity, about quality food. Otherwise, we're not talking. So it's the criteria of autonomy, which means the freedoms and dignity for people to choose their own food. For us, it's so natural we don't even think of it. But for many people, they cannot choose their food because they just receive food. that sometimes is not of good quality, then we never ask them, is it what you like? Is it good for your health? Is it what you need? So it's really important to have that criteria in mind too. And last but not least, of course, is sustainability. So food that is healthy for people and planet. So as you see, we are talking about much more than hunger. And in fact, in the world now, there are more people suffering from obesity than from hunger. So that's yeah. I have no word for it. And FAO, so the Food Organization of the United Nations, is alerting on the fact that food insecurity is on the rise. And that's what we observe in Belgium too, and Brussels too. Yeah.
One of the reasons we had a serious look at the Felix Project at EPIC is the fact that what we see happening in London is anticipating what is going to happen in other cities. In your opinion, what are the causes? Where does it come from? What are the reasons why food insecurity is developing, growing?
I would agree with everything that Amandine has said. I mean, the cost of housing in London is incredibly high. And after paying housing costs, energy costs, and other fixed costs, the budget to buy food is often the only thing that the family has some control over. It's the only thing that can be elastic, and therefore it is the first thing that gets cut. And I would say, financial insecurity, there are many boroughs in London where some people have fewer than £100 in savings. So any event, a new boiler, something needed for the car, an accident that means there has to be financial outlay can have an impact long term on the family's budget and the ability to buy food. But I think also, just picking up on what Amandine was saying about the health consequences of food insecurity. I know we're going to talk about consequences, but, we were talking about this earlier, Camille. When you have so little to spend on food, you are going to buy the food that gives you the most energy for the least amount of money. And therefore, you will see people making what we might consider to be unhealthy choices for themselves and their family. And I would urge everybody to rethink that, because they are not making a choice. That is not a choice. No one chooses to feed their children food that they know is unhealthy. But frankly, when you can buy what you can buy in a supermarket for £2 that could feed your family for a week, or you could buy 2 heads of broccoli that are going to go within 24 hours, you're going to make a different choice. But it's not a choice. You're being forced into it. So, yeah, that's the only thing I would add.
And you were talking about food deserts. Can you describe what is a food desert?
It's an area where you find only junk food. So for some people, they have to go really far to find a supermarket when they can have access to fruits and veg and healthy food. So that is also something to take in mind, because after your day of work, taking care of the children and blah, 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 you're not going to go across, a whole neighborhood or to buy food. So it's also something to take into account. And the project that we are supporting, but also the Good Food Strategy from Bruxelles Environnement, they are also taking care and taking into account this variable to try and rebuild a retail network where when people could have access to healthy food everywhere in Brussels.
There is a street in South London, Streatham High Road. I do recommend it. And I read something the other day that said that in 1 mile of Streatham High Road, there were 150 chicken shops. And I think that I've been on buses in various parts of London where I have gone down what would be considered to be a high street, and there is not a single shop selling fresh produce. There are chicken shops, there are nail bars, there are vape shops. There is nowhere to buy fresh food. And if you don't have a car, which in London you're not incentivized to, And if you can't afford the transport, and if you have children to look after and a job to do, it makes it impossible.
And it's also a disaster when they're only next to the schools, because we can see, and Marie, you will be able to talk better about it than me, but of course then children are going out and buying the first junk food there is. So this should be simply regulated because it's a disaster around schools.
Thank you. So, well, no, this is something we cannot know if we haven't seen it. I think so.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about the consequences on the families, on the children. Is there anything else you would like to mention about the consequences of food insecurity?
Yes, I might add that in Belgium, actually, we've seen it rising. So apparently 20 years ago, it was only 1% of the population who would rely on food aid to survive. Now it's 5%, and it's estimated that only 1 on 4 people is going to the food aid because there's a lack of choice, because it's poor quality, because it's reliable on a number of the supermarkets and everything. So probably 20% of the population now have to rely on food aid because they are in situation that is really dramatic regarding to food. And as you said, food is the variable of adjustment. So that is something really, that I don't think we're aware of that. I don't think we realize that it's 1 in 5 people. Yeah.
I mean, I work very closely with head teachers in primary schools because I'm very concerned about the impact of food insecurity on children particularly. And one of the teachers who teaches at a school in Tower Hamlets, which is a very deprived part of London, the most deprived borough in Europe, I think, she was saying that she had a child who was in a family who couldn't afford food, and he wanted to make some money for the family. And he ended up going into County Lines drugs, and his family haven't seen him for 5 years. And that was all because he found out that his family couldn't afford enough food, and all he wanted to do was help. And so I think there's, yes, that's only one example, but again, people are doing things that they wouldn't choose to do to try and get around the poverty impact. It's very cheerful, is it?
No, it's not so cheerful. So, bon. Enough.
Good news.
Yeah, 2 good news, please. So, Amandine, give us some examples of
that will cheer you up.
Yeah, solutions, please.
Yeah, there are actually many alternatives to it. The thing is that they need to be scaled, but as a philanthropic actor, we consider that it's our role to take risks because we are not bound by any election. We have the freedom to have a longer term vision, and also to take risks to see if these alternative models will eventually prove their impact and grow, or sometimes that they fail and we are just a laboratory. So I can give you actually a few examples of very inspiring people and organization. The first I'll take maybe is VRAC. VRAC is an organization that was built by a very inspiring guy, Boris Tavernier, in France. Now there are 22 non-profit VRAC in France and in Belgium. 2 in Belgium, 1 in Brussels, 1 in Charleroi. So we co-founded the one in Brussels a few years ago. And the principle is quite simple. They want to give access to quality food to unprivileged people, and to fight also isolation, and to, of course, give a fair price to the producers. So they use 4 strategies to reduce the prices. So combining orders, cutting intermediary costs, eliminating packagings, and selling at cost price. And we as funders, we take care of the structural cost of VRAC. But by doing that, it's giving the people their dignity back, because they are seen as consumers, not as beneficiaries. They buy their food at a lower price, but they do buy their food. They also choose their food, because with VRAC, they decide what kind of food they want to eat, and then VRAC goes and build a, I don't know how you say, a portfolio of,
Basket?
Yeah, they do that. So now we are in 8 neighborhoods in Belgium. So we are providing for 1,000 households every month. And we are working with 20 local producers. So that's a kind of organization that is clearly scalable, and we want to replicate it in Wallonia. It's now in Charleroi, but we want to try and have RACs in every city in Wallonia, because I think it's a really good solution. Because it's tackling the dignity and freedom that we were talking, and the choice we were talking before. Another project that is really inspiring also, and that is really a grassroots project, was founded by a very inspiring young woman who herself experienced food poverty at some times in her life. And so at that time, the supermarkets, they weren't incentivized to give their food surplus, so they would just throw it in bins, like you said. And to add to that, they would add bleach on the product, so they would be sure that no one would collect them and that they wouldn't be reliable for anything. So what she did is she went there, she collected some food. It was freezing, so she didn't smell that the products were actually bleached. And it's only when she came back home that she realized that all the food that she had collected was bleached. So she called her organization No Javel, and she's here tonight. And she's really impressive because she has built an organization. Of course, after what she's experienced, there are a number of factors that are just non-negotiable. So everything is organic, super fresh, and it's very important for her to welcome the people with dignity. So you will never find a queue in the streets in front of No Javel, because there is this system of appointment taking, so that the people feel welcome. They can also volunteer, and they're also relying on a lot of volunteers to do what they're doing, because they are very impressive in the number of tons that they're able to collect and redistribute, not only directly to people, but also through a number of organizations that they are serving. And they are laying a part of food banks to that regard, and they also have a community kitchen to transform the food. But I can go on, so you have to stop me at some point.
But we here. That's what we're here for, huh? To listen to this, to inspire.
Yeah. Maybe I will then talk about the last one, also in the room, École à table, because we were talking about the problem of school meals. So we had been warned about the fact that the lunch boxes were empty or with cold French fries. I think at the beginning I thought it was just a legend. It's not. So what we did is try and understand better this issue that is highly complex, because in Belgium you have this institution, lasagna. The school, the meal time is not even in the school time, so nobody really cares, and it's nobody's competency. So for 3 years we've been supported a project that was doing good job, but that eventually dropped out of activity due to other reasons. And so our observation were really clear. There was a lack of political attention to that issue, and the existing solution lacked systemic view due to limited resources. So either they were focusing on transforming the quality of food, but then there was no education made, and so the children, they had a better meal, but they wouldn't eat it. Or the parents would be reluctant to give them this meal because they thought that it wasn't really qualitative enough. So we realized that we really had to work with everybody: the school, the parents, the meal providers, the policymakers. So also with an inspiring woman who worked on the subject for several years, we decided that we would actually found a new initiative. So it's called École à table. And so there is two axes. One is operational, going into school, showing that a different model really works. But the second axe, of course, it's advocacy, because in Belgium we are really, really
Off. Merci, Amandine.
You're welcome.
Bringing some hope to this project.
Yeah.
Can you go a little bit further into the solutions, other solutions than the Felix Project, or the way you think you are going to move forward? I don't know whether everyone knows, but the Felix Project just announced a merger with another organization, very large one.
Yes, so we, excitingly, from next year are going to be a national organization. We have merged with a partner called FairShare, who are experts in food logistics. So they are currently with a network of depots just like ours, but nationally, delivering about 135 million meals a year. So together we will be an unstoppable force in food redistribution. But
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I don't know if I've got a job yet. Like all good mergers, they haven't AOD. So it could be someone different you see next time. But yeah, it's very exciting. And to be honest, we are an organization that is not even 10 years old yet. We were joking about 2025, 26 being a great year for being 10. So we will be 10 next year. And I think that our founders, Justin and Jane, Felix's mum and dad, would never have thought that we could be merging with FairShare, who are a 30-year-old national organization. But we have innovated and pushed ourselves in such a way, particularly over the last 5 years, that actually we can and were competing. And for us, given what we want to do, which is to rescue more food and deliver more food, competition is kind of dumb. You know, we're competing for the same suppliers, we're competing for the same funders, we're competing for the same airtime, all to do the same thing. So for us, the merger made a lot of sense. And yeah, we are two well-matched organizations, which for us is pretty cool. We think, you know, we should be the junior partner in this, but we're very much the equal partner. But yeah, we have always been able to innovate to get more food in a more useful way to more people. So in 2021, we opened our community kitchen. Our community organizations were saying it is great getting all of this raw produce. It means that people can cook at home for themselves and their families. They're not getting a handout. They're actually just doing what normal people do and what they should have the right to do. But actually for some people, if you're in temporary accommodation in the UK, if you're an asylum seeker or a refugee, you get a kettle and a microwave. That's it. You don't get any knives, you don't get any chopping boards, you don't get anything. And so we thought, okay, well, when we next open a depot, we should open a small kitchen and see what we can do. And now those meals are incredibly valuable to all of our CEOs, not just the ones that support people who are living in temporary accommodation. I spoke about our work directly with farmers. So we started with the wonderful Peter, and we now work with 5 farms. So this year we're going to probably get 400 tons of fresh fruit over the course of the summer. That's plums, apples and pears. We'll also be shortly going to pick butternut squash and pumpkins, because that's the season. And there are lots of surplus pumpkins, so we'll be there picking those. So those relationships are not things that we would normally think about, but we've just sort of gone, yeah, we'll get people there. Yeah, absolutely, let's do that. And we just had the opening last week of what we have called Felix's Food Factory, where we are going to take some of the gluts of food. Butternut squash is a great example. We will be wall-to-wall butternut squash for about the next 6 weeks. But weirdly, not everyone wants to eat a butternut squash every day for the next 6 weeks. And on a serious note, a lot of people can't afford to put the oven on for that long to roast a butternut squash or to boil a butternut squash. So the food factory will take a significant proportion of that butternut squash, peel them, chop them, and freeze them, possibly even make them into soups. But that was something that we really didn't know was going to work, but took a risk on. And I suppose that's the similarity between us and Four Wings, is now we're at a size where we can take those risks to do what's right to get more food and to get it to people in as useful a form as possible.
Thank you. If we look ahead, or if you want to help us know what we can do, what would you say about changing the system? What should be changed to... No.
Yeah.
Because obviously we're talking about the disruptive system, the malfunctioning system. So we saw that housing is a problem, the price of housing is a problem, and I'm speaking to the audience that speculating on housing is a problem, is a major problem of our societies. But what else?
We have one major problem in the UK, which is our relationship to farmers and farming in general, which has not been good over a number of years and remains very imbalanced. There is a government fund of £750 million a year, which is currently paid to farmers to incentivise them to send their food to be burnt for energy rather than send it to charities like us. So the government's sort of done half the job, which is making sure that the farmers get paid, and I am all for that. But they are sending edible, good quality, surplus food to be wasted on purpose, and I think that is utterly unforgivable. So our CEO and our head of policy, who is actually Felix's brother, Dan, this is very much still a family organisation, they are working closely with our Department for Farming and Rural Affairs to say, this is crazy. How could you agree to this destruction of perfectly good food? And what we would like is for the farmers to be paid, absolutely, but for the farmers to be paid to send it to us, because we will at least make sure that it's eaten, which is what it was intended for. So I think if there was one thing I would change, it was that attitude. Yeah, well, there you go.
Yes.
I love animals, don't get me wrong. I just don't think they should be eating food that people can eat when people are going hungry.
Amandine.
Well, I think one simple thing is also the collective catering. I think it's a super powerful leverage to transition the system, and it's not that difficult to do. It only requires a change of mindset, that's for sure, and also a change in procurement rules, because we should favor local farmers instead of industrial agro-industry to feed or school or hospitals or all the collective catering. And now the procurement rules are so difficult for local farmers, and so it makes it really difficult. But that's, I think, one point where we can really make a big difference. Yeah.
So for those of you who can travel to London, I think I can say on your behalf that you're welcome. The Felix Project is not going to set up in Brussels. That is not their intention, but the Felix Project welcomes any organization, any people who want to discover and replicate themselves somewhere else. So you do that with New York, I think, New York City?
Yes, so we work quite closely with City Harvest New York, who are probably our closest sibling in terms of how we do what we do. But we learn an awful lot from them because they're so much bigger. And I would say in the UK, there is no one that does what the Felix Project does, even FareShare, who we're merging with. It's not quite the same model. So we are unique from that point of view. But yes, we have talked about who is going to be the person to set up the Felix Project in Brussels. So no pressure, but it has to be someone in this room. So yes, please come visit London. Our depots, you can come in. They are open 6 days a week. We are delighted to have visitors. So please come, steal some ideas, bring them here, and then we can be siblings.
And
City Harvest New York, they do very similar thing to us, but in just in New York. So they will rescue surplus food from their local kind of American providers and distribute it locally. But they're massive, they're huge.
for those who cannot travel to London, where would you recommend the visit, Amandine?
Well, here in Brussels.
Yeah, to get inspired, to volunteer, to
Well,
help.
definitely go to Nogjavel. You can go to Cuisine de Quartier. It's a super nice project there. And I think would be really happy to have also volunteers and inspirators. Comme à la maison aussi, it's a collective. I don't know how to say that in English, but it's a restaurant participatif. So if you want to volunteer, you can go there definitely as well. I think most of them would be happy with some help, really, yeah. But you can come to me, I will tell you where to go.
That's probably the best way to make things change.
Yeah, it's true.
Bon, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm and your energy. Thank you.
You.